There it is. Got it.
Yay.
Okay, it's on. And I think I moved some slides. Now I don't know how to get them back. Oh, here we go. All right, so that was our first slide. Okay, thanks, Alicia. Okay, so the first few slides are going to be an overview of the executive order, namely N5620. And this was issued as a way of giving grace to districts in light of the unprecedented circumstances around COVID-19, because it would be a challenge for districts to have meaningful stakeholder engagement. Some may have started and may not have finished, and others may not have been able to do as much as they wanted, as well as it might have been challenging to get everyone together to develop the LCAP thoughtfully. So there are links on this slide to the actual executive order itself, as well as for as the news release from the governor's office. This next slide gives some more details about the order itself. So it extends the deadline for the 2021 LCAP, and you'll see that date in parentheses. That LCAP is due in December, mid-December. The order also has contingencies to separate the LCAP adoption from budget adoption. So as you know, right now, the LEA budget cannot be adopted without first an LCAP adoption, and now those two items are separated for the 2021 LCAP. The third bullet talks about this reporting requirement. In one webinar, it was referred to as an operations update, but in the executive order, it's called a written report to the community. So this requirement is something that districts will have to generate, which is and include an overview of what you're offering to students in terms of program changes to mitigate learning losses and make sure they're safe and nourished during this this time of social distancing. And we'll get into more details about that in just a few slides. More parts of the overview. So the submission and approval deadlines of the 2021 LCAP and the budget overview for parents for this year, both of those get turned in on December 15th. That second bullet talks about local indicators. So you know, before there was legislation that said local indicators had to be reviewed and adopted at the same time as the LCAP. Well, that is waived for this year's LCAP. We will get clarification on that because I think there was a question around whether local indicators were going by the wayside altogether or if it was just applied to the 2021 LCAP. So we'll get clarification on that. And then another item is that it delays the implementation of the new 3-year cycle. So that new template that we reviewed this year during all of our LCAP workshops, that template does not start until the 2021 school year and will go through 2024.
Hey, Alex. Hey, I gotta go to this webinar. I'll talk to you a little bit, okay? All right, you too.
So to summarize, the 3 documents that are referred to in the executive order are these: the written report to the community with the annual budget. So those are due July 1st. So those are coming up first. The second document is the 2021 LCAP. That's going to be due mid-December. And then the third document is the 3-year cycle template that we're used to and that we were just trained on, and that's due a year from now in July 2021. And so the next few slides are going to talk about each of
go look
the
in my drawer.
documents.
I do have zucchini.
And I'll have,
I don't know if it's good or bad now because it's been
I'll
there
have
for a while.
Alicia go through each of those.
Look.
Naomi?
Sorry, Alicia, I think I just muted you. I was trying to mute everybody. I didn't mean to do that.
No, that's fine, but I think Melissa had a question. Melissa, did you?
No, I was just asking Naomi to get in to mute everybody because she's the host, so I don't have that option right now.
Okay,
Awesome.
I just did. Thank you.
Good job. Okay, guys, so we have 3 different documents that we're talking about. And like we said, for those of you who are on PELS, you heard this already. But the first one I'm going to talk about is the written report to the community. This is the one that is due by July 1st of this year. So in the next few months, really. So what this is a high-level summary that includes information on changes to program offerings that you made in response to school closures. So anything that you've done in response to COVID-19, a description of how the LEA is meeting the needs specifically of unduplicated pupils during that time, and the steps taken to hit those 3 bullets that were in Executive Order N2620, which is delivering high quality distance learning, providing school meals, and arranging for supervision of students. The other piece to this is this would be adopted by your local governing board at the same time that your budget is adopted. The CDE is working on developing a template. We don't have a release date for that. Somebody asked me if I could look in my crystal ball and find it. Unfortunately, I can't. If I had a crystal ball, I might be on a beach somewhere. But the districts submit that written report to the community, to the county office in conjunction with their adopted budget, but it is approved and by their local governing board. Charter schools will submit to their authorizers, and it has to be posted on a district homepage or website. The second document that we want to talk about is the 2021 LCAP. So we're going to have this written report to the community, which is different from what the 2021 LCAP is, that's due in December 15th. It's going to be due to it's 1 year only. It's going to be due December 15th, and then the county office, which is us, has until January 14th to approve it. We don't know what the template looks like. Again, something that we're still waiting for guidance on. But the expectation is that you still engage stakeholders in a similar manner as you would if you were doing a 3-year LCAP template. And a budget overview for parents will be submitted at the same time. And then the last thing is that now the new 2021-24 LCAP template. So this is the template that we have.
Well, she thinks
sorry,
she's
Naomi,
been
you got
fine
it?
for the past
I got it.
3 days.
Thanks.
Okay.
Okay.
But she just ripped off her bandage. I didn't know if you wanted to look inside. It was red, and so I'm assuming that's initial blood, but she doesn't appear to be bleeding or anything now.
Okay.
The swelling has all gone down. I
Oh.
tried
Just
taking her out to go to the
mute all and
bathroom.
Alicia.
Awesome. Okay, so the last one.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's Friday. The last part. Okay, so this is the same template that we were just put so much work into learning, and it's the one that was adopted in January 2020. It's the 3-year cycle, but the cycle is just going to move. It's going to shift from this year to a year from now. So it's going to now be a 2021-24 3-year cycle. So, and that obviously the first version of that is going to be due on or before July 1st, 2021. All right, any questions on the chat about any of those different?
Yeah, Alicia, I put a link in the chat to answer a question. There was a couple of questions about clarifying what arranging for supervision of students during ordinary school hours could mean. And I think right now, the only thing we have is the one state guidance document. It's actually on the CDE's COVID-19 page. But I put a link in the chat. That's kind of all we have right now in terms of guidance on that. That's all they've posted.
No, thank you, Brian, for that. And that's something that I think we told you guys this last week, and Brian and I and all of us have actually reiterated. It's just something to make sure that you're keeping in mind, that you know, this is what we're doing for distance learning, this is what we're doing for meals, and then if students required supervision or if we offer supervision of any kind, what did that look like? If we were working with somebody else, what did that look like? Melissa, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's kind of what it sounds like to me, and I know we are seeking more guidance on that, but. All right, Melissa, are you there?
Sorry, I was muted.
That's okay.
Can you go ahead? What were you asking?
I was
about?
just saying about the supervision piece. Is there anything else?
Right.
I mean,
no, and we were seeking, so Leticia Garcia is seeking additional guidance. We're waiting for the FAQs to find out if there's going to be something specific. And because the language in the executive order is permissive about what the template looks like, we don't know if there's going to be like sections that districts are going to have to report regarding those 3 items, the high quality distance learning, provision of school meals, and the arrangement of supervision for students. So since we don't know what the template itself looks like, we don't know specifically what districts are going to be asked to report about. So what we have is what Brian shared, and when Leticia gets additional guidance or when we get the FAQs, we should have more information about that.
And then of course, you guys probably got an email from Naomi today about there will be a meeting, a workshop where we can share anything new that we've learned, which of course we get out to you guys as quickly as we can. So I think I'm done, Naomi. I'm going to give you back the reins here.
Just real quick, Alicia, so there's some questions in the chat about the federal addendum. And I think the short answer is nothing on that has been addressed. So the federal addendum isn't actually part of the actual LCAP. And that's what, so the actual LCAP is what was kind of postponed and all that. So I mean, we might defer to Lisa Winberg on if she's heard anything more about that or what that process is, but.
Well, I know Melissa had put an answer in the chat earlier about it was like a one and done kind of.
Yeah, so what they had said was that districts will still do their annual evaluation of programs that they would have to do for their federal investments, but they're not going to have to resubmit that to the Department of Education again. So what that actual submission process or local adoption process looks like, that has not been addressed in any of the guidance thus far. We do know that districts are going to do their annual evaluation, and how that is communicated locally is not something that we have any specifics on at this time.
And then a couple more answers real quick. Jill, I have no idea. Nobody's indicated what the new template's going to look like, if it's going to be similar. I mean, we haven't heard anything on that. And then as far as annual update, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when in the executive order, it actually lists the annual update in there. So that is part of all of this whole process.
Right.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Naomi. Go ahead.
I was just going to say in that first, in the first bullet point on the first page of the executive order, it calls out that the LCAP and the annual update are together. So the annual update is part of the LCAP. So when they refer to the LCAP, that includes the annual update. Is that what the question was?
I think so. That's what, yeah. It's
okay.
part of the whole thing.
Melissa, do you want to add anything to that?
No, that's what I was going to say, that the first paragraph, it is hereby ordered that, and it has number 1. That number 1 is just to define that when they say LCAP, they mean both the LCAP and the annual update.
Yes.
There is a question in here about how will our fiscal staff complete a budget for June approval. I don't know if there's no LCAP due until December.
I'd be glad to answer that. So a couple different options for budget adoption. The requirement to spend the supplemental and concentration dollars don't go away. So districts can either push that money, let it fall to the bottom line, so it just is sitting in their ending fund balance. If it's actions you're going to continue on, you would budget it where you're going to continue it on. Or if you want to include it in the body of the budget, you could put it into like a holding account where it would just sit there before it's spent, and then it could be moved between budget adoption and first interim when that'll align with the December 15th date. So a couple different options, but you should still plan on spending the money or let it fall to the bottom line when it can be discussed before adoption.
All right, thanks guys.
And on that note, I'm going to hand it over to James or Lindsay to talk about the adoption considerations.
I can talk about this too.
Okay, thanks.
So with the executive order, there was no waiving of the move the deadline for the LCAP, as Naomi said, but it didn't change any of the budget publication or notices that have to happen. So our office actually posts the notice for the budget and the LCAP in a normal year. So this year it'll just be for the budget. For the public hearing, we have to post the date and location at which the proposed budget may be inspected. So we're thinking this means a physical location, but at that physical location, you could have guidance saying that the budget document's available online with a link for it. Same thing for the public hearing, that you could have the date and time and location could be a online location, but you should still have it posted at a physical location that people could go to. The agenda for the hearing has to be posted 72 hours before, and and then the governing board has to hold a second meeting after the first public hearing to adopt the budget. So not, the LCAP kind of needs to fall out of this process, and we're hoping we get a little bit more clarification when the CDE FAQs go through. But what we're thinking is the LCAP portion of all these adoption considerations go away, but the budget ones remain. So we still have to publish the notice at least 10 days ahead of time. The agenda still has to come out 72 hours before. The budget still has to be available for inspection. And then you have to have the public hearing and the meeting for adoption separated into 2 separate meetings in June. So there's still a need for 2 June meetings, even though it'll just be the budget this year. And then it's not clear in the executive order whether the written report to the community requires any type of public hearing or public notice as well. It doesn't seem that it does, but we're hoping again that'll come out in the FAQ. So once we get clear guidance on that, we can provide that out.
Thanks, James. I have been refreshing my screen from CDE on the FAQs and haven't seen them, so I'll keep an eye out for those. Does anyone have any questions about what James shared?
I have a question.
Sure.
So just to confirm, so the first meeting, when you mentioned that the budget has to be available for public inspection, that can be an online link, or do we physically have to have this document available? I know we have our office is still open with, of course, with like social distancing measures. So we would need, is it only online, or do we have to have a physical copy available there?
So again, it's not really clear in the, I mean, it's actually not even addressed in the executive order. In previous years, it would have been a physical location that needed to be, the document needed to be available. I would say if your district office is open, it's a good idea to have it there. If your district office is closed entirely to the public, I think it's entirely reasonable to move it to an online location. Or if you're, even if your office is open, I think it's more likely people are going to feel more comfortable looking at that information online than they would coming into the office and seeing it. So, so hopefully that kind of answers your question. I don't think it's necessary to have the physical location, but again, we don't have clear guidance on whether or not that is going away.
Thank you.
Okay, if anyone else thinks of questions, please feel free to pop into the conversation or put them in the chat, and then we'll make sure to capture everything. This is being recorded so that we can capture all of the dialogue and the questions and put them out to everybody.
Hi, Naomi.
Yes, hi.
Hi, I have 2 questions.
Sure.
The first question is, will you guys be offering a fast pass before the December submission?
Yes, I was just going to go into what support will look like for each of the templates. And yes, we will.
Wonderful. The next question is for districts, and it sounds like many districts are in the same situation because of the CDE webinar. So many districts were saying, what if we're ready? What if we're done? Can we use the old template? And the answer was no. But in our district, our board had moved our planning calendar way up this year because of it being a new 3-year plan. They weren't sure if they were going to be making a lot of changes. And so we had, in fact, engaged with all of our stakeholders, numerous meetings. The board had, proposed the LCAP actions and services. Our stakeholders all, then gave input on that, and we surveyed them. And basically, we're 75% written. We were just waiting on the May revise to see if there were going to be little minor tweaks. So will we have to re-engage all of our stakeholders at the beginning of next school year for this December deadline?
Well, I would imagine, and please AACI team jump in too if you have any insights or others. I would imagine that because we don't have the details on what the 2020-21 LCAP template might entail, I feel like I can't speak to that, because if they keep it as is, or even just truncate it, perhaps you can use what you already have completed, which would make sense. But if they change any parts of it, then I'm not sure what that looks like. We would still, of course, offer support and fast pass. In fact, we were talking about that. That's what the next slide is about. And if there's option for us to, or for the LEAs to keep that, I think that's a question I can ask and put forth to see if we want to maintain these submission timelines. You know, FastPass was supposed to start next week or the week after. If people still have board meetings and have that ready, might that be an option? That's something I would have to ask. Melissa or Alicia or Brian, do you guys have anything, or James?
I kind of have a thought about that. You know, like when, and this is not authoritative, I'm just talking off the cuff here, but like, you know, when we get to the point where we have some more clarity in the fall, I mean, I imagine a lot of the stakeholder feedback and sort of things we thought we were going to implement are going to look very different. And I guess one way to think about it is that we could have just picked that up during an annual update, but you know, it might be the case that taking a moment to, you know, take half a year to let it settle might be a better path. I know, having done the process, it's frustrating because like you've put in so much work and you've got this momentum, but that momentum might already be disrupted at this point. So these are just some thoughts off the top of my head. But you know, are the changes that we're going to have to make from what we stakeholder feedbacked towards, that's now a verb, I guess, are they substantive enough that it might have triggered a readoption anyways? And I don't, so that's another thought too off the top of my head. So just some considerations.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. And aligned to that, I was also thinking it depends on what is required. So with the annual update, do they want, it would depend on what the cutoff for that is. Would it be the end of the school year, which might have been end of February or middle of March, or would they want information on that includes some of the support that's being offered between now and when the LCAP is due?
And can I just add, from a budget perspective, one of our requirements as the county office is to approve the budget, making sure there's enough expenditures in the budget to support the LCAP. Depending on how the state budget flows out between now and December 15th, there might not be full funding, or COLA might change. So the amount of funding might change, which would impact your ability to implement the LCAP as planned today versus 6 months down the road. So it's just another consideration for waiting.
Thanks, James. So sorry, Shauna, we don't have a definitive response for that as yet. Were there any other questions in the chat or otherwise? Okay, so I will.
There's a question for James about COLA.
Oh, sure. James,
sorry,
James,
I couldn't unmute myself, maybe because it knows I'm going to say something stupid. No, I think so COLA is statutorily calculated. All the factors are now out for COLA. The only thing, so COLA is in statute, what that number is going to be. What we actually technically don't know is if they're going to deficit that COLA, or if they're going to take a wholesale cut to supplemental concentration. Do they take it off the base? There's a couple different games I guess they could play. We're hearing the same thing, that 0 or negative is an assumption that you'll need to make from a budget perspective. But we just don't have enough information to know what it's going to look like. And I imagine in the way that this has all flowed out, there's going to be a political will to protect supplemental concentration dollars. So it might come off the base entirely. It might come off proportionally. We don't know yet.
Awesome. Thanks, James. So please add your questions to the chat, and I'll go on with this last piece. So what our support look like? So let's take it template by template. So with this written report to the community, that's, as it's in quotes because that's exactly how it's written in the executive order. That's due July 1st. So what we were thinking is continue to hold office hours via Zoom. We've already finished. This is our last one for April, and I will be sending the May Zoom hours to you following this, along with a link to the slides. But May and June. And so we don't know the details of what that template and the criteria for what to put in it, other than perhaps those 3 bullets that were in the executive order as yet. Once the FAQs and perhaps some legislature action happens that gives us those details, then we can further update you and we'll provide guidance on that at these office hours.
And can I add one more thing to that, Naomi, just to emphasize a point Alicia made earlier? This gets submitted to the county office, but it does not get approved by the county office. The budget still gets approved, but the written report to the community is, as it states, for you to communicate to your community on what has transpired and how you are addressing some of those components of the initial executive order, the high quality distance learning, the providing school meals, and the supervision of students. So, and then also how you're addressing the needs of unduplicated pupils. So those, when this template comes out, it's again not intended for like the county, we don't have an approval guide for this. It really is intended for you to be able to communicate to your stakeholders how your district has responded in this current situation, and how you've not only addressed things that have occurred, but looking into the next few months, going into the next school year, we anticipate that there will be some opportunities for you also to explain between now and December when our LCAPs due, this is kind of our situation. So in the document, in the executive order, it does say that the Department of Education shall develop a form. So the Department of Ed has to develop a form, but it also says that LEAs may use. So we go from a requirement to the permissive language. So again, we don't know what the Department of Ed will say about that, but in the executive order, it does say that the department will have a form that LEAs may use.
Yeah. So our guidance will be essentially reporting out to you information and facts that you can easily get to as well. And maybe the office hours also lend to discussion on how people, what people are putting in their report if they so choose to share. Thanks, Melissa, for that clarification. Okay, and so then we go to the next template, which is the 2021 LCAP. And so that's due in December. And as I previously referenced, we will ensure that our FastPass process reviews are available for those who would like to participate. And then we will also do virtual sessions there, probably August through October. And I'm thinking those sessions might be 2 hours in length, but we'll see what the need is. You guys would let us know when we're getting close, when we're working on that and getting close to that time. And of course, with both of those, just as with the support for the 3-year plan, anytime anyone needs customized support, you can always reach out to us at any time. And then we get to the third template, which is the 3-year template, the 2021 to 24 template. That's due July of next year. And we will follow our same support cycle there with 4 LCAP workshops and then the FastPass reviews in the spring through early summer. So that's our initial plan. As we get more details, we might make adjustments to that. Any questions on that?
There's a question about whether the written report will be presented during the public hearing and at the approval of the budget. And it's not clearly lined out in the executive order, but so we're hoping that the CDE FAQ will answer that question specifically, but I can't imagine that the written report would need to go for public hearing, since it's more of a document of what we've done and not, I don't know. In my mind, I don't think that's one where you really need feedback. It's just what we're doing. So, right. But again, hopefully that gets clarified in the FAQ, but it didn't appear to be a document that needed to have a public hearing associated with it. At least it wasn't specifically spelled out in the EO that way.
Yeah, I don't remember reading that either. Okay.
And regarding FastPass, there was a question, and we'll be working with each district. If you still would like to go through FastPass in the October-November time period in order to get feedback prior to local board adoption of your 2021 LCAP and submit it in December. Obviously, we'll work with the districts in order to establish a timeline for that and then have that to you before your local board adoption.
Yes, absolutely.
And just to reiterate something that was shared earlier, each of these 3 different documents, each of these 3 reports is a different document. So the written report to the community, we don't know what the template looks like yet, or the form that the Department of Ed is developing. The 2021 LCAP, again, they're indicating that they're seeking guidance on what should be included. So that's a different form, a different template. And then the 2021, 2024 template, that's where we get back to the same, or the most recently adopted LCAP template. So in essence, we're talking about 3 different documents here, and only one of them is one that we're familiar with as of today.
Right.
So there was that question in the chat about the annual update template staying the same, and we don't know, is the short answer. Unless you guys know something I don't, but we don't know what that next template is going to look like and what the annual update for this 1920 will look like at this point.
Yes, there were no details on that as yet to change the annual update. Did I see another question?
Yeah, there's one about baseline data for the LCAP.
Yeah, that's a really good question, isn't it? I mean, we know from the current, the new template instructions say, use the most recent data available. But that, you know, so if you're talking about dashboard metrics, we now know that really when you're developing your LCAP for approval a year from now, the most recent dashboard metrics are going to be the 2019 dashboard. So that's where, you know, I think districts are really need to think through what that looks like. Are there other interim measures that you could use in the meantime to gauge process? So, I mean, we don't have a good answer, but it's something that we hope districts are starting to think through. What local measures, what interim measures do you have to help measure progress?
And we also realize it puts us in a predicament because we're going to be setting baseline using a data point that may not match the subsequent 3 years of dashboard data, because we will have dashboard data in all of those implementation years of that LCAP. So those are conversations we would like to have with you, and we can strategize collectively on, you know, what is our baseline and how do we set a target that will then be reflected in dashboard data that's forthcoming in future years. We do know that according to the latest guidance from the Department of Ed, that they're anticipating in the 2021 dashboard being able to make the comparison between 2021 back to 2019 in order to calculate change. So in essence, we just have the gap year of 2020 that wouldn't have that data. But it you know, that there's nothing been designed yet, so we don't really know what will be developed out of that. And we're also waiting for legislative action in order to not have a dashboard in 2020, because as a state LCFF requirement, that has not been waived yet. Again, we're looking for, we'll be strategizing with you on how do we set metrics and how do we think about 3-year targets, knowing that our current data isn't really current, and then our dashboard isn't up to date yet.
Thanks, Brian and Melissa. I saw a question on what is fast. Oh, thank you, Alicia, for clarifying fast task. So essentially, it's an opportunity, if you would like, for the county office to review your draft LCAP before it goes to the board, and we can give you feedback on the content as aligned to the CSESA approval manual and statute. And yes, I think there was a question also around FastPass and what was it? Are you still signed up for it? I think 21 of 20 or 22 of 23 districts did sign up for FastPass. So we will make sure that you're still on the schedule for the fall. But if you want for the 2020 LCAP, but if you want us to review your 21 LCAP, we can, as Melissa noted earlier, we can make a schedule for that as well. Okay.
And I think we also wanted to poll the group on the next LCAP workshop, which was supposed to be on May 1st.
Yes.
which we don't know if sitting on Zoom for 7 hours is the best use of everyone's time. So
yeah, so we were going to ask, if you don't mind just responding in the chat, would you, since it's May 1st on Friday, and we had office hours, or it was requested that we put office hours, keeping them the same time at 2 p.m. on Fridays. The question was, would you prefer the workshop to be, and it will only be an hour because we, at this point in time, we don't anticipate needing this 7-hour workshop, and I don't want us all on 7 hours on Zoom to tire us out. But so it'll only be an hour. So the question is, do we want to do it from 9 to 10 or keep the 2 p.m. office hours and do the workshop activities from 2 to 3? Okay, I see quite a few saying keep the 2 to 3 office hour time. A couple of them say 9 or. And so, and for whichever time the consensus is, we will make sure to record the session and put out a summary to everybody. Just as we did with our other, with another workshop, we can, like this one, I'll record it, make sure it's got closed captioning, and then send it and post it and send it to everybody so that everyone's got the information and has exposure to the dialogue. And as just to clarify, just to underscore what Melissa's saying, yes, we don't have guidance on the written report. And so we won't have guidance unless anything comes out around FAQs that we can share that kind of information with everybody and have discussions. Let's see, anything else? Okay, thank you guys for responding to that. It looks like the majority are able to participate in the 2 o'clock, so we may keep it then. And again, I'll make sure everyone gets a summary and a link to the slides. So the last slide we have is the EdSource article. You may have already read it, but there's a link to it there if you haven't or you want to review it. It's there for you if you'd like.
And we're open for questions. So based on anything we've shared today, if there's any question that we can answer or any additional information that we can seek in order to respond to you next week, we'd be happy to do that as well.
Yes. Before everyone starts popping off, thank you so much for joining us today and participating in the dialogue and asking some great questions. We will take your questions, look at them, see what we can get responses to. FAQ guidance will come out. I think my microphone just went out.
Melissa, can you repeat your response for federal addendum? Someone was asking.
Yes, so from what we heard on the state and federal program directors meeting from Jeff Brashears, what he shared was that the federal addendum document is what he called a one and done. So it's done at the local level and submitted once to CDE. Each year, the district will do their local evaluation in order to keep it updated for local adoption, but it's not going to be submitted to CDE every year. So in terms of how that's impacted and if there's anything that will need to be done differently this year, we haven't gotten any specific information on impact to the federal addendum. But we do know that it's not going to be submitted to the Department of Education again for approval. And Alicia, please correct me if I missed.
Nope, that sounds exactly what we've heard. Yeah.
And Julie, we'll get back to you on the timeline for adoption, because again, as we know, as districts go through their process annually for evaluation of federal programs, we don't know if that's going to have to go alongside this written report to the community, or if that is also delayed. We don't know in terms of timeline on when that goes to your local board for approval.
All right, any other questions as you ponder? Thank you to the team for jumping in, AACI and Fiscal Services, James and Lindsay, thank you. And as you guys go off, have a great weekend. I'll stay online until 3 because office hours are until then. So I'll keep the chat open, so if anyone has more questions, we can communicate.
Colleen, are you on here?
Yes.
You want to jump on our other one?
Okay.
Okay, I'll see you over there.
Right.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
Thank
Have a good
you.
weekend.
You too.
All right, so I think it's just us now.
Yeah, usually it's Nick and me.
Do you want to, can you pull the chat just so that, I don't know if, can I download that or does it have to be the host that
Yeah,
downloads it?
so let me